Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today is my weekly reading wrap up as well as my June recap. This is really pretty good. I'm not sure what it is, what I made. It's either a breve. It's brewery in any case because it's made with half and half, but something between a cortado and a cappuccino. I don't think it's enough milk to be a cappuccino, but there's a lot of foam in there, which was not necessarily intentional. So anyway, it's pretty good though. Also, I don't know how long this will last. I'm enjoying this beautiful summer evening. I don't know if you can hear the cicadas. Which, as long as I can only hear them and I don't see them, totally cool. But I'm keeping my eye on this waspish sort of creature that's flying around. So if I run screaming, you know why. Okay. I am filming this on Saturday, June 29th, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be able to get this up in time to go live Sunday morning, which is tomorrow, which is actually June 30th, or Monday, which is July 1st. In any case, I'm a little bit hedging my bets here because I'm doing my July recap at the same time just because it fits in my schedule. June isn't quite finished yet. Did I say my recap for July? I meant for June. And also this is going to be pretty unedited, so I'm going to try to speak concisely and not say all the time, and hopefully keep my train of thought going where it belongs. Wasp notwithstanding. So, June recap. Actually, let's do the weekly wrap up first and cover the books that I finished this week. First of all, I finished Love Overboard by Shannon Dunlap, which was the book chosen for Old American Spirits summer book reading club. Oh my goodness, there was a name that she called it that I forget now. Can't remember it. Anyways, but basically she wanted to do some beachy summer reads. And so the first one was Love Overboard, which is a really fun premise. It's about 4 geriatric ladies who are retiring on a cruise ship, and so they just cruise all the time on the ship. That's where they live, and that's their retirement plan. So on this ship, they call themselves the Shippers because not only are they living on the ship, but they have this goal to matchmake people. And so this story is part romance with their first target. Her name is Lacey, and they are trying to match her up. Well, at first they have one guy in mind, but then they quickly switch gears to another guy. John King is his name. And the majority of the story is their efforts, often humorous, to get Lacey and John together. And it's a romance, so in the end, they succeed, but there are certainly some bumps along the way, not the least of which is Lacey has some definite issues which are not revealed initially in the story. As time goes on, you begin to understand what it is that is preventing her from really investing herself in a long-term relationship. And there's also a side plot about a drug ring that is operating on this line of cruise ships. And so it's a bit of a cozy mystery also in the process. So a combined rom-com, cozy mystery, and it's a lot of fun. So fun read if you want something light and summery, vacation, beach read, perfect for that. I personally had one thing that I didn't love about it, and that was I did not feel very invested in the relationship that was happening because the author chose to slowly reveal what Lacey's relationship issues were, what was the root of them, and why she was struggling to get involved in this relationship, even though she was very interested in the guy. And I just had a hard time, frankly, I just had a hard time having compassion for her. And I feel like if I had the benefit of understanding her mindset and being more inside her thoughts, I guess I lack the imagination to project all of that onto her. I mostly was just frustrated with her because I felt like she was just shooting herself in the foot constantly. It was like, girl, just get it together. So I didn't love that, but it also provided a lot of humorous opportunities for the shippers to do their work. So there wouldn't have been a story if she didn't have her issues that she had to overcome. So, and actually I don't have a problem with the issues. Like, I think it was valid, and I just wish I knew more about them as the story was going on, because then I would have better understood why she was reacting the way she was to a variety of circumstances. So that was that. 3 stars. Finished that one. And then this, I'm a little bit getting ahead of myself, but Anne's House of Dreams, I have less than 100 pages left in it, and I am definitely finishing this tonight. 100%. I'm not going to sleep until this is done. So this will be done by the time you watch this video regardless. And I am loving Anne's House of Dreams. I am planning on giving this 5 stars. I feel like Anne of Green Gables is fantastic, and it presents Anne as a young girl, kind of on the cusp of womanhood and becoming a woman, and really does that perfectly and so beautifully. Also, you have the fantastic character and personality of Anne. So I love Anne of Green Gables. Super 5+ 100 stars. And then Anne of Avonlea, I also enjoyed, and I think it's a really fantastic Anne of Avonlea and Anne of, not Windy Poplars, but those are the only ones in there? Yeah, Anne of the Island. Also, yes, Anne of Avonlea and Anne of the Island. You get to see her as a young woman and forging her way in life and becoming her own person. And I love those. I gave them 4 stars, I think, because I would have liked to have had more of Gilbert and their interaction. I always wanted more Gilbert, and they just were not as enthralling as Anne as a girl, but it was still very good. Anne of Windy Poplars is kind of a different sort of thing. It's very episodic, and it tells little vignettes of stories about people that Anne knew when she was away at school during the time when she was engaged to Gilbert but not married. It was written after the rest of the series was written, so it's kind of plugged in. So that one, again, 4 stars. It was fine. It was an interesting read, but there wasn't as much actual Anne. In this one, I feel like now we are seeing Anne as a fully grown, mature woman who is, she gets married early on in the story, and she just has to deal with much heavier things. Her life up until this point has been kind of a blessed life, and now she's having to deal with very heavy things. And I won't say what all they are, but this book definitely starts to have not a darker side to it. Nothing in the Anne of Green Gables series is very dark, but this one and Rainbow Valley definitely have some heaviness to them. There's a lot of heaviness that's dealt with here, and I really love seeing this side of Anne. Still the same personality, but tempered by life and the things that life brings, and the struggles that she has to go through, and the burdens that she has to carry of her own and of her friends. So I love that. I also really love the characters that Lucy Montgomery brings into this book, some of which continue on into the next books, like Susan, who Gilbert hires to be kind of like her helper. I'm 99% sure it's the same Susan who's in the remaining books in the series, but it's been a long time since I've read them. Memory's a little fuzzy, but I'm pretty sure it's the same Susan, and I love Susan. She just brings great humor into the story. Her perspective is so like down to earth, salt of the earth, super practical. She doesn't have time for anybody's nonsense, but everything she says is just golden and funny, hilarious. So love Susan. There's also a Cornelia in this story who is just the sweetest person, and she's always doing like things for the people in her community. She knows everybody in the community, and she's always crocheting blankets for the babies, or making clothes for the babies, or helping someone transportation one day, or taking somebody to the doctor or another day, or bringing somebody food or a meal or something like that. She's always serving people around her, and she has a huge heart. But she's a very staunch Presbyterian, and she hates Methodists with a passion. And also, she is sort of a little bit of like a proto-feminist sort of person, but she hates men, but nobody can ever figure out why. Like, she doesn't have a reason to. She's just, you know, like maybe in her 40s or maybe her 50s, and she just, one of her famous sayings is just like a man. So anything a man does that is even remotely bad or shady or just downright awful, like committing suicide, for example, when she talks about it, she'll roll her eyes and say, just like a man. So it's also very humorous. And it's meant to be tongue-in-cheek. It's not like supposed to be like espousing feminist ideals or anything like that. It's just funny. And then we have Captain Jim, who brings more of the Anne style of wonder and imagination and storytelling that a Lucy Maud Montgomery book would not be complete without. And his stories just have such a depth to them, and such humor, and even a little bit of poignancy often, and a little nostalgia. And he was a seafaring captain, so he has tall tales, but he also has tales about people that he loved and friends that he knew, and very heart-tugging tales. So when I first read this, I was a teenager, and this was not my favorite book in the series. In fact, of all of the books, I found it kind of boring. And I remember thinking, like, here we go again. They're visiting Captain Jim, and he's telling them more stories. So boring. But I didn't find it boring this time. And I think that because Anne is a more mature person in this story, it takes a more mature reader to really appreciate it. So not that a younger person can't read it, it's just you will appreciate it more as a grown adult. So if you read this a long time ago and you're a grown adult now and have lived some life, read it again, and maybe you will love it as much as I am loving it. And then I also will definitely finish this book by tomorrow, because I am on Book 11. There are 12 books, which are essentially chapters, and the last two are shorter ones. They're about the equivalent of one of the other larger chapters. So I will definitely, I've been reading about a chapter a day this week, so will be no problem in reading those last two chapters and wrapping up this book. So I don't want to say a great deal about this, but I love Paradise Lost so much. I'm thinking of doing a deeper thoughts video on this. Not that I have like deep academic thoughts about it, because all I have is what I learned from the annotations here, and in this right here, a tiny little bit in, discussion with my son, and I'm probably going to maybe listen to some podcasts and read some books about it. So I don't have as much of my own thought about this, other than that I really enjoyed it. Now, I was, Cheryl at Candlewick Library, I believe, had said that she remembers when she read it enjoying a lot of it, but also slogging through some of it. So I do want to say that there was definitely moments that I read and didn't understand fully and didn't love fully, because I didn't understand them fully. And there were parts that were definitely a bit of a slog because of the language being sort of archaic, and even with the annotations telling me what some of the words meant, the way they were strung together, I was still a little bit lost and like, okay. But I understand enough of it, and with the help of the annotations and the summaries that I'm reading from the Monarch Notes book, I am gleaning enough to find it extremely enjoyable. So, highly recommend Paradise Lost. One thing I will say about it is that I find it it's really genre bending. So John Milton wrote it in the style of an epic poem, and it's written in blank verse. So it doesn't rhyme. It just has a rhyming, it just has a metric structure, iambic pentameter, I think. And so it follows, that's the structure of the poem. And there aren't like even divisions of it, like even stanzas. There's just a little break and a paragraph shift whenever, like a line indent, when someone else is speaking, or when he's finished a narrative and then it's beginning a new section. So there's not a lot of structure in that sense, but he's definitely following the form of an epic poem. So there's that. And then it's very much like a modern novel in verse, which seems like a relatively new concept, but isn't at all, because you think Fairy Queen and Paradise Lost, that's what they were. So there's that. And then there's sci-fi here, because they are traveling through the cosmos, literally. The bulk of the story, not the bulk, but about half of the story is told from Satan's perspective as kind of protagonist. And he is traveling through the universe, through the cosmos. Starts out in heaven, and then there's a big war in heaven, and then he ends up in hell. And actually the narration starts with Satan and his demons in hell, and then there's some looking back at the battle that was fought in heaven when they were cast out of heaven. And there's a lot of conversation about creation of the world and the universe, and the Copernicus theory about the sun or the earth being the center versus Ptolemy's theory are about the same thing. And Milton never really takes a stand on either of those. That was definitely a huge scientific issue that was raging in the day that he wrote it. And he doesn't really take a side on that. He just, like, it comes up as part of the story. But also what comes up is the process of creation, and where it says in the very beginning of Genesis, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. And so he takes that and he works from that. And there's okay, I said I wouldn't say so much about it, but basically, to sum up, he delves a lot into the universe and the cosmos, and the universe cosmos being like outside the universe that God created, where man is located. And then there's heaven above that and hell below that, and how they traverse and travel from one to the other. So there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of fantasy. Satan is over here shape-shifting all over the place. Like, first he's this, and then he's that, and then he's something else. And then he doesn't shape-shift into a snake. He inhabits a snake. So that's how he goes and deceives Eve. And so there's all of this kind of stuff. And then you have these fantastical creatures, which are biblical creatures, because we know there are angels and there are demons. But we don't know much about them, what they actually are like. And Milton uses some actual names of angels, but he makes up some other angels and makes up whole stories about them, etc. So you have that genre as well. And then there's definitely a romance there with Adam and Eve. There's some beautiful, beautiful passages illustrating the relationship between Adam and Eve, which is just really lovely. I enjoyed reading those parts. And then you have, finally, what is, again, often considered a new genre, which is biblical fiction. A fictional story based on biblical characters or events, which is totally what this is. And that's not a new thing, right? And he's taking the bare bones of the story, and he's sticking to what the Bible says about Adam and Eve and Satan. Now, you may disagree with some of his interpretation of it. You may agree with some of his theology or his doctrine as he is telling this story. But he is sticking to what is written about the story in Scripture. Applications and interpretations may differ, but he's sticking to what's actually there. He adds a lot of extra things, though. He's using his imagination vividly to wonder about what was it like at the beginning when God was in the process of creating the world. What was it like before he created the world? What was it like when he created the demons, or the angels, not the demons, but the angels? And what was it like when Satan persuaded the other angels to follow him? And what was it like when they were kicked out of heaven? And what was it like when Adam and Eve lived in paradise? And what did their life look like? What did their relationship look like? And how did it happen that they fell? And then what happened immediately after they fell? How did they feel? How did they respond? What sort of emotions did they have to work through? And how did the angels think about these things? How did God respond to these things? How does Jesus play into all of this? And Milton is thinking about all of these questions, and he's answering them with his imagination. Now, you can't use this as biblical truth. This is just an imagination and wondering, like, I wonder what it was like. And these are possible answers, what it was like. Scriptural truth, I mean, parts of it that are taken from scripture, yes. But the extra stuff, no. But it's fun to wonder. And I feel like, humanly speaking, there is always that wonder, hence the name of my channel, right? That we wonder about these things. So, really loving this, and I'm predicting 5 stars. So let's skip to the June recap portion of this video, and I will try to be brief. That's really funny. Okay, so first of all, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books in the month of June. So you can see I haven't written anything for these two because still in progress, but I will. So, of the ones that I read, let's see, I had 1, 2, 3 5 stars, or probable 5 stars, which was Anne's House of Dreams, Paradise Lost, and 0 to 100, The Gospel to the Saint, which I really loved. Short book, but really succinct explanation of how the gospel works in our sanctification as well as our salvation. It was fantastic. I was just talking to my sister the other day. She had read it as well, and we both agreed that it was a great book, great little book. And then I had a couple 4.5 star books. Recorder by Cathy McCrumb. Really enjoyed that. Sci-fi. There's been a lot of buzz about that one, so I'm sure you have heard about that already. And then Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora, Neale, Hurston. Like I told in the Facebook group where we discussed the books that we read for the challenge, the Reading Your Classics challenge with Teen Ink Society, I said, I'm not sure that I buy everything that Zora Neale Hurston is selling, but I love the way she sold it, the way she told the story. And I really got sucked into the character's life, Janie's life. Occasionally, I wanted to smack Janie, but overall, really enjoyed it. And I just loved her use of language and the way, the prose and the narrative. Loved it. So 4.5 stars for that one. And then 4 stars for The Vanishing at Castle Moreau, which was by Jamie Jo Wright. And my favorite thing about that book was the ending. Loved it. And then Becoming Free Indeed by Jinger, Duggar, Vuolo, I also gave 4 stars. That was a great memoir of her experience growing up in an extremely conservative, approaching cultish sort of family, and then how she found freedom in Christ as a grown woman. And that was a very interesting story. 3 stars for the books that I didn't love as much. This Changes Everything. I just felt there was too much emphasis on trying to work out your own sanctification or legalism, like living by a set of rules. And I didn't love that aspect of it. And then Scott Hamilton's The Great 8, which was more of an inspirational self-help sort of book than I was looking for. I wanted more of a memoir sort of book, but I did enjoy the parts. But I mean, I enjoyed it, and there wasn't anything I disagreed with anything that he said, but it wasn't something I'll read again. I just enjoyed it because it was Scott Hamilton. And then 3 stars for The White City by Grace Hitchcock, which is part of the True Colors series, which is a light rom-com, murder mystery sort of thing, and it was enjoyable, historical fiction, but not something I'll reread or write home about. And also, same with Love Overboard, which I just talked about. And then the biggest disappointment this month was Children of the Stars by Mario Escobar, which I read with Alma. And there were several of us who were on there as well. Jeanette at Jane Reads, I know, and a couple of other subscribers who don't have channels. And I feel like there was someone else with a channel on there, and I apologize, can't remember who all. But we read Children of the Stars, and we're discussing it as we read. I really enjoyed the discussion and the different viewpoints. But in the end, we were all kind of disappointed with a variety of things about the book. Namely, that the boys' parents just left them on their own, and that wasn't necessarily portrayed as a negative thing they were doing in the story. And to us, it just seemed like glaringly bad, to put it very elementary. Like, you don't just abandon your children in a time of war, even if your motives are good and you're trying to create a better life for them. So if ever there's a war, a bagu, do not separate yourself from your children. Keep them with you, whatever you do. Okay, let's do that. Let's take care of those babies, okay? Anyways, so those were the books that I read in June. And so what I was able to accomplish goal-wise in the month of June. Nothing there, nothing there, nothing there. Nothing there. Well, I could show you my little pretty little book tracker, but you'll see that again in my video coming up this week, which is my mid-year check-in. That's my book tracker so far. Doing pretty well with that. I did add a lot of nonfiction to my list, so that's good. You see all these dots that I may or may not fill up. I have now read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nonfiction, and my goal is 12 in the year. So that's pretty good. I'm more than halfway through. I added 3 this month, so that's good. 3 nonfiction. For Chantel's Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, I fulfilled it and I also failed it at the same time. I realized after the fact, after I'd already filled it in and marked it off and everything, that the books that I read were not books from my shelf. Oops. Which is like the whole point of the challenge. I borrowed a recorder by Cathy McCrumb from the library, which was for the Doyle track, read a science fiction or fantasy book. And The Watchmen, read a book of poetry, Paradise Lost. I also did not borrow from the library, but I ended up buying it during the course of the month because I wanted an annotated copy and I was just reading like a Kindle version from Project Gutenberg or something. So I bought myself an annotated copy halfway through the month to read, which was a smart move, and I do own it now, but that's not really the point of that challenge. So going forward, I promise, pinky promise, that I will only read books that were already on my shelf for the challenge. And then for the Tea and Ink Society, we were supposed to read a classic from the American South, and so I read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and so good, love that one. What the Dickens Facebook book club read Anne of Green Gables, and I read Anne's House of Dreams instead, well, and am reading it. I did add a couple books to my 5-star read list. Look at that list, growing, guys. I added Anne's House of Dreams and Paradise Lost and 0 to 100, The Gospel to the Saints. So added 3 5-stars to that list. Did not add any DNF, so that's good. I was able to, and I already did, but again, I'm a little bit like ahead of myself, but it will happen today. I finished Anne's House of Dreams, which was another one in the Anne series that I made a goal to read this year. I would like to get to the others this year also, but definitely I made it as far as that one. So, yeah, these are rereads that I want to read this year. Still working on Les Mis. And The Scarlet Pimpernel is on there and has showed up in my TBR for like 2 months now, but I will get to that one. And then the others, hopefully I will get to this year. Laura France, I had intended to read another of her books for the historical fiction. We'll get to that in a second. For the author backlist of Jamie Jo Wright, I was finally able to cross off one of those. I read The Vanishing at Castle Moreau, but I still have a few, and she keeps adding to her backlist, so I'm never going to catch up to that woman. So I am predicting that my favorite book from the month of June will be Paradise Lost. So then I have to decide between Paradise Lost and Emma M. Lyon, which one is the best. And I feel like, for posterity's sake, Paradise Lost has to definitely win between those two. I mean, I feel like that's just the right thing to do. All right, so let's talk about the readathons that I was doing in the month of June and my success or failure as regards those. First of all, the summer book bingo, which is going through the whole summer, I actually was more successful than I felt like I was in the middle of the month. And you can see all of the blocks that I colored off are my bingos, or are my, yeah, whatever, you know, I did those. So this column has 4 actually. I just need the one on top, which is a hot cover, which I'm struggling with, but, so I have 4. I almost have a bingo. Altogether, I have, not including the free one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 books read, so I couldn't fit the other ones on there. I was looking at it earlier today, and I was kind of trying to fit some others on there, but we'll see. I didn't so far, but anyway, the ones that I read in June are a classic, Their Eyes Were Watching God, Joyful, which is the grade 8 by Scott Hamilton, which is all about being happy even when life throws you a curveball. And then the nonfiction I read several nonfiction, but the one I put on here was Becoming Free Indeed by Jinger, Duggar, Vuolo. And then friendship or found family, I put The Vanishing at Castle Moreau in that spot. And then for vacation or travel, I put Children of the Stars by Mario Escobar because they travel all over the place in that book. Not really a vacation, but they travel. And then for a reread, I put Anne's House of Dreams. And then for a new to me author, I did White City by Grace Hitchcock because I had never read anything by her before. She is a new to me author. And also I believe that was her debut novel, if I'm not mistaken, but it could be. And then for sci-fi or fantasy, I put Recorder by Cathy McCrumb on there. So I have 3 in the bottom row, and then 2 in this row. 4, like I said here, almost have a bingo. And then 2 in this column, and then 1 in each of these columns. So in every direction, I have something. So that's good. But so far, I don't have... Oh, I guess I have 4 this way also. If I read a graphic novel or manga, then that one would also be a bingo. So I am making good progress. Better than I thought it was. As for the historical fiction readathon, it's kind of ironic because historical fiction is my favorite genre. But I failed, guys. I failed with a big fat F-A-I-L. Oh, that's not entirely true. I guess I read 3, but the 3 historical fiction that I read weren't necessarily ones that I was like, oh, the book was amazing, everybody should read it. And also, I mean, I only read 3, which is fine. Like, honestly, that's fine. But normally, historical fiction is what I read. And I like really good, meaty historical fiction, but I didn't read any of that. So, what I did read was... The White City, which accounted for the prompt to read a book from the country that you are from. So White City was set in Chicago, and I am from the United States. Chicago's in Illinois, which is in the United States, so that works. Then read a book set in a different country. So I read Children of the Stars, which was mostly set in France, but then also goes to South America, I think Argentina. It was earlier this month, so I kind of don't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was Argentina. I did not read anything from a new to me time period. Did not read anything with speculative or magical realism element, at least not that was historical fiction. I did not read anything with the perspective of an ordinary person, unless you count Children of the Stars. Well, even White City, I mean, she was kind of an ordinary person. She was the daughter of the police chief, but yeah, I don't know, maybe things could count for that. For mystery or romance, I counted the Vanishing at Castle Moreau, which has a dual timeline, and there's a contemporary timeline, so that wasn't historical, but there were actually 2 historical timelines, and the whole story was dealing with historical events. There was even, it wasn't a timeline, but it was dealing with events that happened in the 1980s, and then events that happened in the late 1800s and events that happened in the early 1900s. So, in addition to the current timeline. So there was a lot of history going on there. And then I did not read a classic work of historical fiction. So, failed at that. And yeah, so those are my accomplishments, or lack thereof, for the month of June. And actually, that was only like less than 13 minutes, like 10 minutes or something. That was pretty good. So, all right, so I will see if I can get this uploaded and just very briefly, tiny bit edited and up. And so it might be the end of June, or it might be the beginning of July when you are seeing this, whatever the case is. I hope you had a fantastic reading month. I hope you had some fantastic reads. And tell me in the comments how many 5-star books you read. Let's put it that way. How many 5-star books you read in the month of June, and which one was your favorite overall from the month of June. And I will see you next time. Bye.